Friends, welcome to the channel. My name is Hako. In this video, I'm gonna clarify some points. I'm gonna clarify like my stance on trigger, and this kind of a follow-up video to another video that I made called trigger problem, or like be aware of this before you pull trigger. Link to it down in the description. Now that video was made to like kind of highlight some strength and weaknesses with trigger and the design choices they made to go for, and the vast majority of people, they were happy with, you know, the info and the heads up. There was a group of people that thought that I might be, you know, a little bit too critical on her, maybe I was selling her short. And I think this comes from a misunderstanding of what I actually meant, rather than, you know, that was what I was actually doing. So I thought, let's break it down even more. And let's start by talking with like the really good things about trigger. Number one, trigger is fun. She is really fun. Although fun is subjective, I found her to be super fun. She has, I don't know, her playstyle is like nothing I've ever seen before. Going into sniper mode, like her animations, like everything just feels cool, it feels new, it feels fresh. And when I play Trigger, I don't feel like, you know, I'm just playing a reskin of another agent. Like, she's one of the most unique things we've had in the game so far. And being a fan of Metal Gear Solid 5, like, I don't know, it feels like I have Quiet with me on a mission, and she just, you know, helps out no matter what. And it's so satisfactory to, like, you know, see her just, you know, dash around enemy, like, help me shoot them, and I don't know, everything about it I just like. And number two, her biggest draw in the game is that she requires almost no field time whatsoever. After she's entered the sniper mode, she kind of does her thing. We can switch into her whenever we have energy to like make her go into the suppression fire state. And if she has an ultimate, like we can do the same there. But mostly she takes up close to no field time whatsoever, definitely the least amount of any stunner. And another good thing about Trigger is that, you know, her additional core passive is a universal thing. At max level, it just makes enemies take 35% more damage. And this isn't like Lighter's buff, it's not tied to any element. So in this aspect, she's quite like a universal stunner. So she is gonna be a solid stunning unit that you can basically slot into any team. In some cases, she's gonna be the best slot stunner, in some others not. Lighter will still be the better stunner for both fire and ice. 1, he has massive buffs to them, and also 2, he extends the stun window, and that is very good. So let me just preface this by like saying I think she's gonna be a good universal stunner. And she has very unique and like fun gameplay, so like if you like using her, you know, go for her. But if we're talking from like a meta perspective, like let's dive into the nitty-gritty. I've highlighted her strengths, now let's do some weaknesses. Now all of the stunners we've had in the game so far, they are like a mix of like two things. Lycon, for example, he is a debuffer and a stunner, and any ice team can like make use of both of them because he shreds enemies' ice defense. Xingyi, I'd call her a debuffing stunner as well, because, you know, her debuff is that they take a lot more damage when they're stunned. Now Kulina, she's also one part debuffer and one part stunner, and the reason why not too many people were talking about her until Evelyn, and like I'd say she was severely overlooked, is because we didn't really have any agent in the game that, you know, massively made use of the fact that she increased the amount of damage an enemy takes from chain attacks. In comes Evelyn, and her entire gimmick is chain attacks, and Kolida being able to increase the damage of chain attacks by 70%, like immediately made her value just rise amazingly in stocks. But before that, she was kind of a stunner because nobody really cared about the debuffs that she provided. Now, let's be completely just to Kolida, she does also come with like some other perks. Nobody stuns a motherfucker like Kolida does. Especially if you're M2s, like you get refund for your EX special, and you can do like free bam. And if you have an ultimate, like she stuns very fast. And then we arrive at, you know, like the latest event stun agent that we got, which is Lighter, if we're not counting Pulcra. Lighter is a 3-part stunner. He's a buffer, he's a stunner, and he's a damage dealer. Now, anybody that's used Lighter will know that he packs a serious punch, pun intended. And a lot of this is that he, you know, benefits off his own buff. Now, he shreds ice and fire resistance of enemies, so which makes him also a little bit of a debuffer, and he gives a massive whooping 75% increase to both ice and fire damage. Obviously, Lighter being a fire agent makes it so like he can fully use these buffs. So I'd say up until Trigger, like Lighter is the heaviest hitting stunner we've had in the game. But here's a little food for thought. Imagine if they had made Lighter a physical agent, but he still buff fire and ice, so he wouldn't benefit out of these like buffs. I don't think anybody would be saying that he is hard hitting anymore, but we'll get into that. And just as like for research for this video, I took Evelyn, I took Lighter, and I took Astra into like a bunch of different content that Afterwards, show me how much damage was dealt, individually by each member. And Lighter in an Evelyn team, he provided around 20% of like the overall damage. Evelyn around 70, and then Astra the rest. And then we reach Trigger. And now if we look like with the same lens and the same criteria, like what does Trigger do? Like what is she designed to do? Now Trigger is an agent in 2 parts, or you know what, let's say 3 parts. She's 1 part stunner, 1 part damage dealer, and then 1 part debuffer. The debuffing part gets added on like even more with the W engine. And her biggest draw is that she's off-field. And now, if you've been following my channel, you know that I'm super excited about Trigger. Like I have been ever since we like got her revealed. I just think she's dope. So anything I say in this is not, because of a lack of interest in Trigger. Like it's the opposite. Like I'm hoping to use Trigger a lot and in a lot of different themes. But the way I'm seeing it and like the way I'm seeing the numbers is that 1 part of Trigger is going to be locked away. Whenever a character gets released, they kind of, imagine a stat screen whenever you're starting Baldur's Gate or you're starting a new Dungeons and Dragons campaign. You get a certain amount of like stat points to like allocate. And these characters kind of work the same. Ellen, when she got released, Hoyo gave her 10 stat points and she got to like spend them. The next character, they get a little bit more stat points. And the amount of stat points a character gets kinda, increases per patch. So say when Bernice came around, she got, 15 stat points like put out in like, different cool stuff that she could do. Then, you get your certain odd character like Miyabi, that, she just gets double the amount of anybody else just because she's extra special and she's a void hunter. And whenever we pull for a new character, like say we pull for Evelyn, I feel like we all want to like, be able to use all of the stat points that character got given. Like we want to be able to use that character to its full potential, right? It's like if you go to buy a new car, you don't want the passenger seat to, be taken out because, the passenger seat costs extra. We want a full product. And like that is why, when certain titles, hide core functions of a character, like, deep hidden within, mindscapes or eidolons or constellations, whatever game we're playing, that just rubs us a little bit the wrong way. The most player-friendly thing possible is a fully complete functioning agent that can, reach 100% of their full potential, just basic it. And then mindscapes and cinemas, they are cherries on top. Like if we take Yanagi for example, I have Yanagi M0, I run her on Fusion Compiler. I did not pull for engine. Yanagi is perfect. Right now she operates at 100%. If when she reruns I were to pull on Mindscape, she would maybe, start functioning at 120%. And if I also went for engine, maybe we're talking 140%. But just basic it without pulling for those, like Yanagi is perfect and I can utilize every inch of the character. And anything surplus are just cherries on top. And Yanagi is also a very good example because at Yanagi's release, we basically had no idea what Miyabi would do. Now Miyabi, as everybody knows, is, the strongest agent in the game. And her absolute best teammate is Yanagi. Yanagi is so good because she can like force disorders. Miyabi thrives on disorders, so a character that can, just press a button and have them happen is obviously, a very good teammate. But what I really liked, that even though like they work as good together as like, if they were intended for each other, which I'm sure to like, a certain extent they were, they are still completely like functional and you get 100% of their value, of their capacity and their potential with even if you do not run them together. Like you can run Miyabi with Bernice, you can run her with Nicole, you can, take your pick. Same with Yanagi. She is absolutely broken, just on her own and can, run a variety of teammates and still reach 100% of her potential. Now, Miyabi was a little bit less shares on top because her W engine is very good and there's no other like crit rate engine in the game. And with Miyabi, you kind of want to reach, 75% crit rate, which is doable without the engine, but it's a lot harder. So then we come back to Trigger. Trigger's entire bread and butter is her aftershock attacks. Both her skill and her ultimate are enable even more aftershock attacks to happen. And the after attacks being harmonizing shot. Now Trigger, she also converts crit rate into days on her aftershock attacks. Once again, aftershock is her bread and butter. And if we read it, when Trigger's crit rate exceeds 40%, each 1% crit rate above this threshold increases her days dealt by aftershocks by 1.5%, up to a maximum increase of 75%, which means that Trigger's most important stat will be crit rate. Now, here's a problem. there are no crit rate engines in the game, and this additional ability starts counting at 40%. Like anything prior to 40 doesn't count. And if we just take a look at, say, my lighter, who is a heavy hitting boy, which I've got on your standard stunner gear pieces, it barely starts counting for him. And this is with the crit rate Shockstar Disco on 4. Now, 1 or 2 comments on the other video was that, she doesn't need to reach the max threshold, like we don't need to maximize this buff. And, fair enough. I agree. Like, to some parts, I do agree. She will be functioning even if this is not maxed. I put Lycon on kinda as much crit rate as I could muster. So, like, I'll just show you the discs. These are the best Shadow Harmony pieces I've gathered up. With this, we reach 68, which, is decent. And in this case, 28% gets, counted in and converted into days by her additional ability. But what we also do see is that, attack and crit damage, they do take a hit because, like, it's almost impossible to, like, reach anywhere close to 90 crit rate. And also, getting hits into the other things. So we still have not seen, officially what her engine does yet, but it is gonna be crit rate main stat. No question about it. The reason why she converts crit rate into days and, not impact into crit rate or, something along those lines is because they want to sell us the engine. And if you want more than half of, like, the value of the additional ability from trigger, you are gonna need the engine. It's not the cherry on top, it's a requirement to, like, reach more than 50% efficiency from the additional ability. And obviously, crit rate, especially in Trigger's case, serves one more purpose, obviously critting, because he is also meant as a damage dealer. But if you do not care about that and you just want her as a stunbot, that is super fine. I just need to say this again, she will always be a good stun agent. And now we come to part 2 of her requirements, like be an actual damage dealer. Soldier Zero Ambi. Now, if we go back to, like, the stat points, every character when they come out, they ask for a certain amount of stat points from Daddy Hoyo, then they get to put them into different stuff. Sanby has had a bunch of her stat points allocated into buffing her team's aftershock damage. Meaning that if we do not run teammates benefiting of aftershock damage increase, we are in, some cases losing out on it. What makes Soldier Zero Ambi so good in aftershock teams is that she allows 30% of her own crit damage to be applied to any teammate's aftershock damage. And with buffs, reaching 250% crit damage is absolutely doable. We can say 200 if we want to count it low, but roughly she gives 70% more crit damage to aftershock damage. Now, the marks that we expend, which is a big chunk of Ambi's damage, they also benefit of this. And the lightning that comes down afterwards, if we consume them all in, like, rapid succession, that also counters aftershock damage. So, like, Ambi herself would feel, quite frankly, super weak if she wasn't buffing herself by, like, with her own buffs. And also her additional ability, Voltage Surge. When Ambi is the active character, all squad members aftershock damage to enemies with a silver star mark increases by 25%. So just off the bat, 70% extra crit damage, and just flat 25% increase all damage from trigger, basically. Now, those buffs are enormous. Absolutely enormous. And trigger, a character that wants to get as close to 90% crit rate as possible, being able to get 70% crit damage just for free on basically everything she does, I cannot overstate, like, how much this buffs her own damage potential. Like I said earlier, almost nobody was talking about Kolida before Evelyn got into the game, but after Evelyn dropped, like, Kolida is a very, 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 very viable, like, stunner to an Evelyn team, just because she can increase chain attack damage. And that's during, like, a little while of the stun window. And seeing how trigger, attacks all the time, and some of his buffs are applied all the time, not only during stun windows, like, this buff pales in comparison. And as a little experiment, I took Soldier Zero Ambi and Palkra together with Astra, and I entered into the Holo Zero, and I did a bunch of game modes that once again, like, showed me the tally afterwards, who did, like, what amount of damage. Palkra consistently landed between helping out with 15 to 20% of the damage dealt after, like, a total encounter. And in some ways, Palkra is mini trigger. They both do, like, the damage via aftershock, and they both have, like, a really good damage potential if run together with Sanby. So I had this A rank stunner lifting about 20% of all the damage together with Sanby, and that is the same amount of damage that Lighter is, like, himself carrying in an Evelyn team. So if we take that and then we apply it to trigger, if you just look at the trial Pulchra, and then we look at her special attack, and we can see that, you know, her Nightmare Claw at this level has a damage multiplier of 80%. If we then look at trigger, this is her aftershock damage. Then if we look at trigger and we see her harmonizing shot, we can see that it has almost the same damage multiplier as Pulchra's, but it happens twice. But it doesn't stop there. So it hits twice. But after we've done EX special, after we've done ultimate, there's gonna be a lot more of them flying out. And once you get trigger like start shooting, she basically doesn't stop. Pulchra is a little bit more like finicky with her trigger. We need to like do some evasive assists into her, etc. So like she takes a lot more time to like activate, and she's a lot more time to like upkeep. Meanwhile, trigger is very consistent, you know, just being there all around. So trigger ran together with Sanby. I am expecting gonna be able to like pull 35 to 40% of the team's damage. But that is on the condition that she's being run with Sanby. If you take away Sanby, you take away massive amounts of damage from trigger. In just the same way as if you take that away from Pulchra, you take away almost all of Pulchra's damage potential, and she basically just becomes a stunbot. And like, I don't feel like enough people are talking about what the freaking pack Pulchra is packing when paired with Sanby. And Pulchra lifting almost 20% of the damage is, you know, as you can see, on kind of a lackluster build Pulchra. But from my testing, like, this is the absolute best build to like run on Pulchra if I run together with Sanby. If I don't run it with Sanby, the damage just isn't worth it. And then it's better to just have her as, you know, on a 4-piece astral voice, just to, you know, throw some buffs towards the main carry. And that is kind of the position we are with it, with Trigger as well. She has had a bunch of her stat points, you know, plopped into being a damage dealer, but that role isn't really available and isn't worth it unless we have also Sanby's buffs. Without those, it is better to, you know, just run her on, just like they done in Trial, a 4-piece Shock Star, and just have her, you know, be a stunbot, because the damage is, you know, it's not gonna be there, it's not gonna be worth it. And this is the gripe I have with Trigger. And this is just what I want to, you know, just shine some awareness of, so people can make a more informed decision when pulling for Trigger. Now, another comment that I got on the last video is that the Restrained is actually really good on her, and I agree. The Restrained has great daze potential when it comes to Trigger. So it works if you're only out to have Trigger as a stun bot, but for the damage half of her, it does nothing. And with the Restraint, we're activating about half of, you know, her additional ability. And Trigger will be a good stunner in that case, but she's not gonna be living up to her full potential. She isn't gonna be the Astra of stun agent, because Astra is kinda always the best support in any team. Already at Trigger's released, she is not gonna be the best stunner for fire and not gonna be for ice. That's still going to be lighter. She is by far going to be the best stunner in a Sanby team. And I honestly can't see them, you know, releasing a stunner that works better with Sanby in the upcoming 2 years. Because they are so niche and like so specific, so like they work together like this. However, I can see them releasing, you know, a better general stunner for the other elements. Like this is the second electric stunner we're getting, but, you know, maybe the next one is a physical stunner or an ether stunner. And if they buff 2 elements, you know, kind of like the same way that lighter buffs fire and ice, then I don't think Trigger is going to be, you know, the best stunner for that element either. In my opinion, running Trigger in teams outside of Sanby is like running lighter in teams without a fire or ice carry. You lose out on his massive buff and ice and fire shred, but you know, all teams can benefit of the extra, like, extended stun window. And one could argue that, you know, having an enemy stunned for 3 seconds longer is the equivalent of making them take 30% more damage. But I think just because everything is like reversed when it comes to Trigger, people have a little bit of a hard time, you know, just seeing it. Since she personally is the one losing out on the buffs, it's hard to see the drop in value. Because just as like we have never seen, just as like Sanby is its own entity, because we've never had an attacker buffing teammates before, we haven't really had a stunner that, you know, actually really, you know, does something themselves. Like we've always looked at like, what can this stunner do for my carry? Meanwhile, what we have here is like, what can my carry do for my stunner? And they work in perfect symbiose. And once again, I'm not saying Trigger is gonna be a bad character. I'm not saying she's gonna be a bad character objectively without engine and without Sanby. She's still, you know, gonna be a good universal stunner that requires no field time. nothing can take that away from her. And if you just want her as a stunbot that you can slot into any team, the restrained will do fine. But as someone that's been super excited about Trigger, and I still am, and possibly my new favorite team to run is gonna be, you know, the Aftershock team with Ambi, Trigger, and, you know, perhaps even Pulchra. Like, I think it might become my new favorite team. But as a massive fan of Trigger, I am a little bit sad about like what Trigger loses in like her own potential when you pair her with anybody else. And once again, I look at Yanagi that, you know, works at 100% capacity just on her own, and Miyabi 100% capacity just on her own. But you put them together, then Miyabi works at 120%, and same with Yanagi, just 120%. But then we take a look at the duo of Sanby and Trigger, and I feel like, you know, when you put them together, they work at their intended capacity at 100%. You take them away from each other, then they both work at 70%. But as just an off-field stunbot with half of her additional ability, she will still be a good stun agent. It's just that Trigger was designed to be so much more, and in order to reach her full potential, you need Sanby and you need her engine. It doesn't mean that she's useless without it. But I've never seen the full potential of a character like being hidden behind like this many looks and requirements in the game before. And the way I'm viewing the 1.6 patch is like, you know, either you take all of it, you take the package deal of it, or you take none of it. Or like, that's how I'm reasoning. Because to me, on a personal level, these characters do not feel complete without the other. They are not complete characters like Yanagi and Miyabi that, you know, then also ends up working perfectly together, but they are instead kind of codependent to like get the full value out of each other. And it also got brought up in the previous video that, you know, some other characters also, you know, have really benefited from their engine. Like, you know, in some cases really needed their engine. The way I'm seeing it, Trigger is the worst situation yet. And I'm not sure if it's because she's a stun agent, you know, people just give her an easier pass on it. The Caesar didn't have, you know, a single impact engine for defense. But at the end of the day, what impact does for Caesar is her shield strength. That's it. And she has no problem, you know, just reapplying her shield. But at the time I did make a video, you know, just talking about that. I think it's a little bit shitty. And I did say that I thought that there should be an impact defense engine, you know, release it with an event or, you know, just something. But that just impacts her shield strength, and, you know, nothing else really gets stronger with impact. The other case we've had this happen with engines has kind of been Miyabi. And with Miyabi, you know, her engine kind of in some ways felt half mandatory at least. We could make good use of Roaring Ride, but that meant, you know, basically having to tank most other stats just to, you know, hunt for crit rate. And the other character that weirdly gets brought up a lot when it comes to like the engine question and characters really needing their engine is Evelyn. I'm not sure how we reached this stage. I'm guessing some big content creators said that she needs her engine and she's significantly worse without it, and then that kind of just echoed throughout the community. And I will claim that Evelyn absolutely does not need her engine. It's a good engine, don't get me wrong, but she can make a very, very good use of the Brimstone. And I've even set out to like test this in videos, because to me it didn't make sense after, you know, reading her engine and crunching the numbers myself. Like, it's a good engine, but like, what do we mean need? And basically the TLDR from those is that, yeah, with Evelyn's own engine, I could clear critical Shiyu in 52 seconds. With Brimstone, it took me 60. In Deadly Assault, I could reach 40,000 with Brimstone. With her signature, I could reach 43.8, I think it was. So yeah, Brimstone works super fine on her. Attackers are blessed with a lot of crit engines. But with Trigger, you are gonna have a hard time, you know, reaching more than 50% of like actual effect of her additional ability without her engine. So one last time, peeps. She's gonna be a good universal off-field stun agent. Her biggest draw is that she takes up almost no screen time. And as someone that's super excited about her, that really likes everything about her, I'm just a little bit saddened in one certain team. She is so much more. And I've not made this video to like hamper anybody's excitement about Trigger, because I really don't want that. But if you're disappointed, like after hearing certain of these things, like that disappointment would have arrived like after you'd pulled her and discovered it for yourself. Anyway, I do my own research, have my own testing, and, you know, have my own thoughts. And one part of being a content creator is, you know, sharing those thoughts. And I do try to, you know, make my very best at like, you know, highlighting both the positives and the negatives. So yeah, everybody, let me know your thoughts down below. Sorry it became a lengthy one, but if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Big hugs, and I hope you think that I did an alright job. Alright everybody, until next time, Hako out.